everyone, how are you? I hope you're doing really well. This video is a little bit of a departure from the norm for me. I haven't actually made a mudlarking video this week because I've been really busy trying to complete some of my Thames glass fish. Some of you may know that I make fish out of fragments of glass which I pick up along the River Thames, and it's been such a long time since I've actually put any out on my Etsy site that I really thought I'd better just get a move on. I've got several on the go, and so I've been focusing on that this week. Actually, some of them have turned out really well. I'm really pleased about it, and I will let you know when I'm going to put them up for sale. They're not going to be on Etsy this time. I have decided to leave Etsy. I'm starting up a different selling platform, and I'll give you all the details about that when I put them on there. I'll give you a sneak peek of a couple of them. It's really funny when I'm making fish. I never really know what they're going to turn out like. I just sort of surround myself with all the glass and put the pieces together. And at the end, I look at them and I think, wow, where did you come from? And this little fella is an exact example of that. He just kind of, I say he, could be a she, just materialised, and I really love this one. He hasn't been varnished yet, but just look at that little fishy mouth. Isn't he lovely? And this one, which is an absolutely beautiful one, is made out of lots of bits of coloured glass. And yeah, that's really a rather special one. It took a very long time to collect up all the glass which this beauty is made from. So that's just a little taste of some of the fish that I have been making this week, or rather finishing off. So anyway, off the subject of fish, but staying on the subject of food, you may recall that some time ago I gave a talk for the Totally Thames Festival, and I did speak about it a few times on my videos, and I wanted to give you a little taste of what that talk was like. I did this talk on the 19th of September, part of the Totally Thames Festival, which is a fantastic festival which takes place every year to celebrate the wonderful River Thames. And so many events take place, and it's just great because the river inspires so many people, so it's brilliant to have a festival dedicated to the river. And I was fortunate enough to give a talk at Woods Quay, which is the home of Woods Silverfleet, which are these rather beautiful boats that go up and down the Thames. You can have events on them, you can have wonderful dinners on them. And the Woods family, they are a family of watermen since the mid-19th century. And so it was a perfect venue to have this talk. I was giving this presentation, and in the background you can see the river flowing past with the boats, and you know, it was a real immersive experience. And the topic of the talk was food and drink related mudlarking finds, and the title was A Mudlark's Feast, Bringing to Life Thames Revelry and Dining. And so I brought along lots of my Thames finds that are related to revelry and dining, you know, Roman pots, perfume bottles, clay pipes, Roman bottles, that kind of thing. And afterwards, people were able to taste some food, which the wonderful Woods Quay chefs prepared. We had wild boar, we had soft-boiled eggs in pine nut sauce, which is a Roman recipe, and people were tasting old-fashioned cordials and meads, and my friend David was there too, and people were able to try a clay pipe with some old-style tobacco. Also, there was some perfume from one of the world's oldest perfume houses, and my friend Jemanda Speedwell was there with her amazing collection of Thames pipes. So it was a brilliant event, it was really good fun. And of course, you can't experience exactly how it was, but I thought you might like to see the presentation which I gave, which is a PowerPoint presentation, all about my Thames finds related to food and drink, and some of the stories associated with them. So I hope that you'll enjoy this. It's a little bit different. And I learned so much when I was preparing for this talk, and I'm sure that you will learn a few miscellaneous, strange little snippets of information too. Always useful to have at a dinner party. Some random information about kings and queens and their dining tastes, etc. So I hope you enjoy, and I will be back again very soon with another mudlarking video, and I will also give you details on where you can find my glass fish. Welcome to A Mudlark's Feast, bringing to life Thames revelry and dining. Now, the 19th century MP John Burns described the Thames as liquid history, and I love to think of it as a giant liquid storybook. But for the purposes of this talk today, the Thames is a giant sumptuous soup full of fascinating foodie facts and marvellous mudlarking finds for your delectation. There's nowhere quite like the River Thames, where you can find a centuries-old top of a Roman pinch-neck flagon nestled up against a 1970s ski mandarin and lemon yoghurt pot. And indeed, you never know what you're going to find when you're out mudlarking. I was out a few weeks before I was preparing for this talk, and as I was walking along, my head was full of the ideas of food and drink, and I was trying to think about what I was going to say at this talk, and I flipped over a stone and I came face to face with this cap badge. And as I stared at it, I was sure that I could see a simmering bowl of soup in the middle of it, and indeed it turned out to be an Army Catering Corps cap badge from around about 1941, and as a result I learnt quite a lot about the Army Catering Corps. But fear not, we're not going to talk about army food today. We're going to focus more on the lavish dining preferences from the past, and believe me, I found out so much when I was preparing for this talk. I learnt so many little pieces of miscellaneous information related to so many of my finds that are connected to food and drink and revelry and dining. And so everything that I show you today on this presentation is related in some way to something that I found along the River Thames. And so, as I was saying, I learnt some fascinating facts. For example, did you know that George IV's favourite breakfast was 2 pigeons, 3 beefsteaks, 3 parts of a bottle of wine, a glass of dry champagne, 3 glasses of port, and a glass of brandy? Well, this little medallion here that I found in the Thames mud some time ago was created apparently to commemorate his death in 1830, and I can only imagine that he may have died from something to do with overindulgence. And here is another king who loved his dining. Now this is Charles II, and you can see here this copper halfpenny, which I found in the Thames mud. Now Charles II was always served his food on bended knee, and there was someone at dinner whose sole job was to dab his mouth. And he was also one of the first people in the country to eat a pineapple. So let's take a little stroll down onto the foreshore, and when we walk down onto the foreshore and we look around us, you're guaranteed in some places to see lots of oyster shells mingled up with all sorts of other different types of shells as well. Now, where did they come from and why are they here? Well, they could be, some of them, a lot older than you might think. The Romans used to love oysters. A Roman dinner party wouldn't have been complete without baked oysters washed down with wine. And indeed, the rich and poor alike feasted on oysters. Tudor theatre goers enjoyed snacking on oysters whilst watching Shakespeare. And I love to think that some of the oysters that I see near Bankside, near the Globe Theatre, may have actually come from the Globe. The commoners who paid 1 penny to stand in the pit of the Globe Theatre to watch the plays, who were known as the groundlings and the stinkards, munched on oysters like we munch on popcorn. Charles II, who liked to have his mouth dabbed at dinner, had a banquet for the Garter Knights where they feasted on 16 barrels of oysters and 6,000 storks. of asparagus. That was in 1671, so another oyster lover. Back in Victorian times, oysters were sold on almost every street corner in London, and one of the most popular Victorian dishes with the lower class was, in fact, oyster pie, which doesn't sound terribly appetising, but apparently it was a huge favourite. And what about all the bones? It's not just oyster shells we see scattered everywhere. In some parts of the foreshore, there is an alarming amount of bones. Jaw bones, femurs, all types of different bones. So where do they come from? Well, chances are many of them come from butchers of the past, centuries-old kitchens, chop houses, eating houses, slaughterhouses. There are many places they could have come from. And indeed, London has always been a meat-eater's haven. In 1725, London consumed 60,000 calves, 70,000 sheep, 187,000 swine and 52,000 suckling pigs. And again, outside the Globe Theatre, there would have been Elizabethan fast food in the form of venison, goat, lamb, rabbit, hare, mutton, swans, herons and poultry cooked on portable spits. So this could account for some of the thousands and thousands of bones that are scattered on the Thames foreshore. So now I want to tell you about a few of my favourite bony, teethy finds, starting with this boar's tusk here. Now, one king in particular loved hunting wild boar, and that was King Henry VIII. He used to go to Hyde Park and Green Park and hunt boar, and then he would have it served up for dinner. In fact, for his Christmas feast, as well as swan, stuffed peacock, seagull, beef and turkey, Henry was served the wild boar he hunted, and this served to show how powerful he was as a king, his prowess, and just how strong and magnificent he was. He enjoyed hunting so much that, in fact, wild boar was hunted to extinction by about the end of the 17th century. The Victorians still managed to get hold of some, though. Here in the Illustrated Times of 1857, we see the boar's head and Christmas pie for the royal banquet at Windsor Castle. Now, these are some of my favourite toothy finds, and if you are a regular viewer of my YouTube videos, then you will very possibly know what they are. But if you don't, here is a clue. Yep, they are in fact carp pharyngeal teeth. They are carp throat teeth. Now, when I found this out, I didn't really know if I wanted to know that carp had throat teeth, but it's something that you simply can't unlearn. They have them in their throat so that they can grind up all the little prawns and things that they suck in through their mouth. But back in the 17th century, there was a man who enjoyed eating carp, and that was our very own Samuel Pepys, the 17th century diarist, who in 1658 had an operation, a successful operation for some very painful bladder stones. And so every year after that, he used to have a stone feast. And for his annual stone feast, diary entry, 26th of March 1662, he said, "I had a pretty dinner for them, a brace of stewed carps, 6 roasted chickens and a jowl of salmon." Now, that's it for the pharyngeal teeth. And this is, well, it's definitely my favourite bone find. Now, can you guess what it is? And many of you probably will know what it is because I have spoken about it before on my videos. Well, it is in fact a turtle rib bone. Now, however did a turtle rib bone come to be in the mud of the River Thames? Well, I found it near a Georgian dump area, and turtle soup gained popularity in England during Georgian times, so between 1714 and 1830. Live sea turtles were captured in the West Indies and brought to England in tubs of seawater and kept alive until they were put in a soup, presumably. And indeed, King George II, who is here on this coin, which I found in the river some time ago, he would have enjoyed turtle soup during his reign. It really was considered the ultimate in elegant fare. And there were many different recipes, but the most elaborate way to serve it was calapash and calipee. So 2 soups served in the upper and the lower shell, one with the upper green meat and one with the lower yellow meat. Now, I have to admit, it's something that has never appealed to me at all, and I do believe that some people still eat turtle soup, but it's not something that I would particularly want to eat at all. And sadly, I have to say that I don't think that whoever once had this turtle rib bone in their body, i.e. a turtle, I don't think he escaped the soup pot. So now let's move on to pottery. And the wide variety of pottery found on the Thames foreshore reflects the wide range of eras and periods of time that our mudlarking finds span. Sometimes we find pieces of pottery with the fingerprints of the actual potter, the person who made the pot or the cup or the dish, and it's really special. It's like a real link to the Londoner of the past when you find a piece with a fingerprint in it. You can see some examples here. So now I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine that you are in a Roman kitchen and we are cooking up a storm for Marcus and Flavius, and the kitchen is full of delicious smells of baking dormice, fish sauce, fine fish, oysters, wine. Everything is wonderful and we are just having the best time cooking up this meal, and we are definitely going to be using a Roman mortarium. I actually have my mortarium here, which I was fortunate enough to find a few years ago. And a Roman mortarium is used for pounding and mixing, and it's got coarse grit. You can see the coarse grit and flint there on these photographs embedded in the surface to help the grinding process, to grind up all the herbs and the spices and other things to make sauces. And this coarse grit and flint is embedded in the surface. And there's also a pouring spout, and it can also be put directly on the hearth to cook the sauce as well. So sauces were often made in them, like garum, which is a strong tasting fishy custard made from fish fermented in salt water. Yum. And so we've got several dishes on the go, but I really want to cook something fantastic for Marcus and Flavius because we haven't seen them for a long time. And so I've got my Roman cookbook here, Apicus, The Art of Cooking, named after Marcus Gavius Apicius, a Roman gourmet who wrote several cookbooks, and it contains several of his recipes. So I'm looking for some inspiration for what to cook for our dinner, for the main dish, because I really want to impress them. And in this book is all sorts of wonderful recipes, including roast wild boar, ostrich ragout, tuna, veal, dormice, nut tart, soft-boiled eggs in pine nut sauce, and much, much more. But then I see something that really inspires me. Apicius advises that flamingo tongues are particularly tasty. And that's it. I've got flamingo in my mind now. I'm going to have to send out my husband Caesar to the market to go and find a flamingo. And I hope you can find one at this late notice. But luckily, we may also have another option. But first of all, let's have a look at the recipe. So flamingo in spiced date sauce. Scald the flamingo, wash and dress it, put it in a pot, add water, salt, dill and a little vinegar to be parboiled. And in the mortarium, here's our mortarium, crush pepper, cumin, coriander, laser root, mint, rue, moisten with vinegar, add dates and the drippings of the braised bird, thicken, strain, cover the bird with the sauce and serve. Absolutely delicious. And as I was saying, there is another option because at the bottom there is a little footnote and it says parrot is served the same way. So if Caesar can't get hold of a flamingo, he can bring a parrot home instead. But whatever we have, flamingo or parrot, Flavius and Marcus are bound to be extremely impressed. So now that we've got the parrot and the flamingo and everything cooking in the kitchen, or at least Caesar's gone out to try and get the flamingo. Hopefully he'll get the flamingo and we won't have parrot. But anyway, moving on, we now need to lay the table. So for that, we are going to use our best pottery. And we have here some Roman Samian ware. I've also been lucky enough to find quite a bit of this. And here we see a lovely example of part of a cup and some other fragments of pot. So we're going to lay the table with our Samian ware. And this piece here actually is a beautiful piece of Samian ware which is currently being registered with the Portable Antiquities team at the Museum of London. And it would have come from a dish that would have resembled something like this. So actually a perfect dish to put our centre piece, our wonderful dish of flamingo. So that's going to look marvellous in the middle of the table. I'm also going to get my best drinking ware out. And for that, I'm going to get my poppy head beakers out. This has got to be one of my favourite Roman finds. It's called a poppy head beaker, and if you look at it, you can see why, because it actually sort of resembles a poppy head, and it even has little dots of glaze on it. So it's just such a delicate, pretty piece of Roman pottery, and incredible to think that it survived all that time in the Thames mud. Another one of my favourite Roman finds is the top of this Roman bottle. So we've got our Roman bottle, and in there we will put our wine or our mulsum, which was wine mixed with honey, or some cordial, or even some water. So as you can imagine now, we've got all our best tableware out, and the table is looking absolutely fantastic. And so now, whilst our Roman meal is being prepared, let's time travel to the 16th, 18th century kitchen, which is the kitchen of the pipkin. Let's say we're going to the 17th century. We'll go in the middle. Okay, we're going to my 17th century kitchen, and pretty much every 17th century kitchen would have had a pipkin. And you can see some pipkins here. They were used for cooking soups and stews over heat from the coals or a wood fire. And the handles, as you can see, were hollow so that a stick could be inserted in them so that they could be manipulated around without you having to burn your hands. I've got quite a collection of pipkin handles of varying different sizes, and like I said, pretty much every 17th century housewife, kitchen, tavern would have had probably quite a collection of pipkins to cook their meals. So I am again trying to find some inspiration for something to cook in my pipkin, and I have been told at this late notice that it's very possible that Samuel Pepys is coming for dinner, and I really want to do something good, because if he's coming for dinner, he may well write about it in his diary, and so it's got to be something that he's going to be very, very impressed with. Now, you'll remember that Samuel Pepys is the one that had the stone feasts, where he feasted on carp, so I'm not going to do carp. I'll do something different, and for that my 17th century neighbour has lent me some of her favourite cookbooks. And here we've got Robert May's book, The Accomplished Cook, which was published in 1660. It looks very promising. Expert and ready ways for the dressing of all sorts of flesh, fowl and fish. And yes, you're not hallucinating. You can see a heron there, which just popped up on the screen. Robert May tells you not only how to cook your heron, but also how to fatten it up once you've caught it. Well, this late stage, I don't have time to go out and catch a heron, let alone fatten it up. So I'm going to have a look at one of the other cookbooks that my neighbour has lent me. And this one is The Good Housewife's Jewel by the 16th century author Thomas Dawson. Now we're bound to find something good in here, and there it is. There it is. I've just seen exactly what I'm going to cook. Larks in a pipkin. And that's larks in a pipkin, not mudlarks in a pipkin. That would be an awful lot tougher, but larks in a pipkin, they're going to be lovely and tender. And so let's have a look and see what the recipe says. Take of your mutton broth the best and put it in a pipkin, and put to it a little whole mace, whole pepper, claret, wine, marigold leaves, barberries, rosewater, vergius, sugar and marrow, or else sweet butter. Parboil the larks before, and then boil them in the same broth and lay them upon sops. And sops is pieces of bread soaked in dripping or wine or broth. Now that's perfect, and I have most of the ingredients, but I don't have the larks, and I need to get some wine and some bread too. So I know exactly where we're going to go. We are going to take a trip to the bustling, busy streets of Pudding Lane in London in the 17th century. And so before we go and look for our ingredients, do you know why Pudding Lane is called Pudding Lane? If you read that quickly, you'll know the answer. But anyway, do you know why? Well, for me, Pudding Lane, it always conjures up these ideas of delicious puddings, chocolate puddings, steamed puddings, apple pies and all that sort of thing. But no, actually it has nothing to do with those wonderful, sugary, delicious puddings. The name actually is a medieval word. Pudding is a medieval word for offal or animal guts, which would frequently fall off the carts coming down Pudding Lane from the many butchers that lined the streets. There were lots and lots of butchers in Pudding Lane, and it was a one-way street leading down to the Thames. And so the butchers used to put all the offal and the waste onto these carts, which would be taken down this one-way street, down to the Thames, and they would either be thrown straight in the Thames or put onto the waste barges. But on the way down, this offal used to fall off the carts, and so Pudding Lane was always just covered in offal, basically. So that's where the name comes from. So not terribly pleasant, but a very good place to go and buy some wine and some larks and some bread. So that's where we're going right now. And one of the reasons we're going there is because I have a rather wonderful trader's token that I can spend in one of the shops there. Now, before I tell you more about my trader's token, which I was lucky enough to find in the Thames a couple of years ago, what is a trader's token? Well, it's exactly that. It's a token used for trading. And trader's tokens were issued by businesses like bakers, butchers, fishmongers, candlestick makers, taverns and inns between 1648 and 1672 in response to a lack of small change. And the good thing was you could use them in the shop that they were issued by, but you could also use them in the surrounding shops and businesses as well. So you weren't limited to just spending it where you actually got it from. And I had this rather wonderful token, which was issued by a Brian Appleby of Ye Maidenhead in Pudding Lane. Now you can see here on there are some initials, and it is in fact B, A and W. Now B is for Brian, A is for Appleby, and W stands for Winifruit, his wife. And I just think Winifruit is just the best name. It's such a fruity name, Winifruit Appleby, so it fits really well into the theme of food. And they had an establishment called Ye Maidenhead, which was actually like a winery, a vintners, a spirit merchants, and it's dated 1657 in Pudding Lane. So yes, issued in 1657, Brian Appleby, a wine merchant of Ye Maidenhead, Pudding Lane. So that's where we're going to go, because it's going to be the perfect place to buy the claret which we need for our larks in a pipkin. And what else would they have sold? Well, Brian and Winifruit Appleby sold wines, ales, and also food. But in terms of wines, you could probably have got a few of the beverages such as this list here. Canary, which was sweet fortified wine, muscatel, claret, perfect because we need claret, Spanish wines and ales such as Mad Dog, Angel's Food, Lift Leg, Dragon's Milk, Stride Wide and Go by the Wall. So a very large selection of interesting sounding ales as well as lots and lots of wine. So I think I'll take a few of the ales as well because you never know, Samuel Pepys might like to have a beer whilst he's waiting for his dinner, for his larks in a pipkin. So what would Brian Appleby have kept his wines and beers in, or what would he have served his wines and beers from? Well, it's very likely that Brian had Bartman jugs in Ye Maidenhead, and I've got some beautiful Bartman necks here that you can see. I would absolutely love to find a whole Bartman jug. I think it's kind of unlikely that that's going to happen, but you never know one day. But for now, I've got a beautiful selection of the necks, and they all feature this sort of rather grumpy looking bearded man who is supposed to represent a mythical wild man who was popular in folklore and myths of that period. These were used between the 16th and 18th century for importing, storing and serving ale and wine. So I think I'll have a couple of those full of claret, and the good thing about that is that when they are empty, I'll be able to use it as a witch bottle, because the interesting thing about these is sometimes people used to use them as witch bottles, which is when they would put in some nasty things like toenails, pins, blood, old wine, and then they'd seal up the bottle and then bury it in the chimney or under the front doorstop or in the wall to keep evil spirits away from the house. So they have like a double purpose. Not only are they used for storing wine and beer, but sometimes they're then used as witch bottles. Now, Brian could also have had onion bottles, very similar to this, which dates to around 1690. And this is one of my favourite finds. I found this a few years ago, and when I found it, it did not look like this. And I'm going to show you what it was like when I found it. So there we are, the story of my onion bottle dating to about 1690, and you know, it's almost more special because it was broken when I found it, and I'm just so glad that I rummaged around in the mud to find the other pieces. And now, you know, unless you knew, you wouldn't really know that it was broken, and it's a beautiful object. It's quite small and it really looks like a little onion. You can really tell why they were called onion bottles, because this one just is like an adorable little onion. So very possible that Brian Appleby had some bottles very similar to this for his wine and his brandy. And some people would have bought in their onion bottles into the wine merchants to have refilled, and then they would take them away, drink the wine, come back when it was empty and have it refilled again, because sometimes you find these lovely bottle seals, personalised wine bottle seals. And if you were very wealthy, chances are you would have one. I found a few, and these two are really, really lovely. One of them, I think it probably says something like Thomas maybe Padfield and H. Roberts, and so they were probably quite wealthy, and they would have taken in these personalised bottles into the wine merchants and had them filled up with wine or brandy. And this was done mostly between the mid-17th century and the 19th century. And, you know, every time I hold this little tiny trader's token, because believe me, obviously it looks very big there, but it's absolutely tiny. I mean, it's amazing that I even found it at all. It's so small when you think that it was washing around in the Thames for hundreds of years. But whenever I hold this tiny object in my hand, I just think, wow, you know, what a story this has got. Because, of course, it came from an establishment in Pudding Lane, which is a very famous lane because it's there that the Great Fire of London started. And it's amazing to think that Brian and Winifred Appleby may have visited Farriner's Bakery to buy bread to serve in Ye Maidenhead in the years leading up to the Great Fire of London. And of course, I went to Farriner's Bakery in this presentation to get the bread, the sops for the larks in a pipkin. So it's just, yeah, it's one of those finds which is very, very special because so tiny and yet such a huge story behind it, that trader's token from Pudding Lane. So what about an after-dinner smoke? Now, it's very possible that both Brian and Winifred Appleby smoked, and we do find lots and lots of clay pipes on the foreshore, as you will know if you watch my videos on a regular basis. It's something that I find a great deal of. I do enjoy finding them. And the fact of the matter is that it became very, very popular from when tobacco was introduced in the 16th century, roughly around 1580. And in fact, it wasn't only popular, it was absolutely encouraged. And this 16th century report on tobacco, called Of the Tobacco and of His Great Virtues, it was widely sort of celebrated as something which provided a lot of cures for some dreadful things like the relief of toothache, falling fingernails, worms, halitosis, lockjaw, and it protected against the plague, so they said. Oops, no, hang on a minute, that should have been plague, not plaque, but they probably said that it protected against plaque too. And during the height of the plague, smoking a pipe at breakfast was made compulsory for the schoolboys at Eton College in London. And so it's no surprise then that we find so many pipes in the River Thames with it being so popular. Men, women and children smoked, and they were disposable. They were only smoked once or twice before they were thrown away. And we can date tobacco pipes by the shape and size of the bowl. You get the very, very small ones, like here you see at the top, which are older, and then gradually the bowls became larger as tobacco became more widely available and less expensive. So you can see this one here, which is actually my oldest tobacco pipe, and this one probably dates to the late 16th century. And then we get to the Victorian pipes, which are just a complete explosion of creativity. I often think that the pipe makers from then, from the Victorian times, they just had such an imagination, because you find clay pipes with absolutely everything on them, from little faces to ships to horses to dogs to mermaids to the oddest one probably that I found, which is up there on the photograph of a lady hitching up her skirts and sitting on a commode. So yeah, there's absolutely no limits to the imagination of the Victorian clay pipe maker. And of course, we can't really talk about clay pipes without having a quick pipe extraction. So yes, as I was saying, we find plenty of them on the Thames foreshore. And every time I find a clay pipe, I can't help wondering what the person was like who smoked it, because you know, it's always pretty certain that the last person who touched it before you do when you find it is the person who smoked it, sometimes several centuries ago. So it's a really personal piece of history. And sometimes the clay pipes have remnants of tobacco in them. I always leave the mud in to dry before I take it out, because you never know, you might find some tobacco at the bottom. And I recently learned, thanks to a lady called Susan, that there is a term for this little bit of tobacco in the bottom of a clay pipe, and it's called a dottle. And I really like that word. I'm going to say it again. It is a dottle. So it's quite fun to find a dottle of tobacco in the bottom of a clay pipe that you have taken out of the Thames mud. Now, not everybody was convinced of the virtues of tobacco, and King James I was absolutely not convinced at all. In 1604, he published his Counterblast to Tobacco, describing smoking as a savage custom, hateful to the nose, and making a kitchen of the inward parts of man, soiling and infecting them with an unctuous and oily kind of soot. So there you go. He was not having it at all, and so he imposed heavy taxes on it, and people still continued to smoke, didn't put them off. So let's talk about something a little sweeter smelling, and so let's move on to perfume. So here we have a bottle stopper, which is from a perfume bottle, and funnily enough, I found several of these over the space of about 2 or 3 years, and I was delighted when I started to research them to find that they came from one of the oldest perfume houses in England, if not the world. And they all have an Orb and Maltese cross on them. They all come from a similar kind of perfume, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And yeah, I'd love to know why they all became lost on the same area of foreshore. Maybe it was some kind of delivery which took place, and somehow or other they ended up over the side of a boat. Who knows? But certainly my gain anyway, because they really are rather lovely. You can see them a little bit clearer here. There's the Orb and the Maltese cross. You can see London, and the rest of the lettering is Grossmith and Son. Now, J. Grossmith and Son was founded in 1835 in the City of London, and it's one of the oldest and largest perfume houses in the world, founded by John Grossmith. And they had a warehouse at Dowgate Wharf on the Thames. So maybe it was in the process of loading these bottles of perfume onto a boat. Maybe that's how they got lost and I ended up finding them. Who knows? We'll never know for sure. But their factory in London was known as the Laboratory of Flowers, and I think that's such a beautiful name for a perfume laboratory. Here is John Lipscomb Grossmith, who developed the firm into a famous perfume house. But the interesting thing is, by 1970, Grossmith was insolvent and was no longer in family ownership. So this could have been the end of the Grossmith story. But I went to meet the Brooke family at Fortnum and Mason. And Simon Brooke, who you can see here in this photograph, is the great-great-grandson of the founder, John Grossmith. And he told me the story of how Grossmith was brought back to life. You can see us all here in Fortnum and Masons. It's always wonderful when you can make a link from the past to the present with something that you find in the river, and then even go that step further and meet some of the family that are also related to the find. So this was particularly exciting for me. And it was only Simon's interest in genealogy that led him to discover quite by chance that he was descended from the Old English farming family who founded Grossmith. His family had never actually spoken of it. Then further research revealed a cousin with some of the old formula books, and Simon felt compelled and inspired to change his career, and he and his family set out to revive Grossmith to its former glory. So now Grossmith is back in family ownership, and it was relaunched in 2009. And they're now present in Fortnum and Mason, as you can see. I had a wonderful visit. I even had a glass of champagne. It was really wonderful. And at the event, we did actually have some perfume, and it really does smell absolutely beautiful. And so the Brooks told me that my stoppers were used for products known then as toilet water, eau de toilette and eau de cologne, which would have been sprinkled on clothes and handkerchiefs. And the stoppers have a bit of a secret. Now you can see my stopper there, which is firmly sealed shut, but the stopper on the other side unscrews to facilitate this sprinkling, as you're going to see here, which was demonstrated by the Grossmith family. So the little orb unscrews. Now, unfortunately, I've had a go on all of my stoppers and none of mine unscrew. They've been sitting in the Thames for way too long, but certainly years and years ago, they would have unscrewed as well. And so back in 1897, Grossmith created a scent for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. You can see the young Queen Victoria here on the coin that I found in the river a few years ago, and the slightly older Victoria there sitting in her chair around about the time of the Diamond Jubilee in 1897. And this is what they created back in 1897, the Victorian Bouquet. And here actually is some footage of Queen Victoria being taken along to her feast for her Diamond Jubilee, where she would have feasted on cod with oyster sauce, and ballotines of duck in Cumberland sauce, and chocolate profiteroles. And of course, she would have been wearing her Grossmith perfume. Fit for a queen. And it's interesting because now the new, revived, relaunched Grossmith have created, or did create rather, a scent for Queen Elizabeth on the occasion of her Diamond Jubilee in 2012. They wanted to continue the tradition of celebrating royal events, and they created this scent for Queen Elizabeth. And you can see the modern scent here next to our Queen Elizabeth II, and then the older one here next to Queen Victoria. And we had a little sample bottle of the scent created for Queen Elizabeth II, and it was absolutely divine. Just a few squirts of it, and the whole of the venue where I gave the talk just smelt absolutely heavenly. And Amanda and Simon Brooke told me that they'd had a meeting at Buckingham Palace to learn of the Queen's preference, and most important was that it should be delicate. And so the result was a floral tapestry, including many traditional British flowers: lily of the valley, narcissus, violet carnation, hawthorn. And they explained that the bright blue label recalls the colour of the original Victorian bouquet carton. And today, or rather when I gave the talk, you could experience the divine scent for yourself. And yes, as I keep saying, it was really rather wonderful. So that's the story of Grossmith and my bottle stoppers that I found in the river. And Grossmith is now restored to its former glory and back in family ownerships. And you know, it's nice, a little bit like the bottle stoppers. It was lost and then refound. And so all that remains in my mind now is this kind of question as to who dropped these bottle stoppers. Why were so many of them found in the same area of foreshore? We will never know. But again, you know, a lovely story comes out of a very humble, simple Thames find, and that's what I love about these mudlarking finds. So before I finish this talk, I just want to now time travel to Elizabethan times. And we're at Greenwich Palace on the banks of the Thames, where there was much revelry and dining. And indeed, it was one of Queen Elizabeth I's favourite palaces there. She was born here. And it's very close to here where I found a very special coin. But before I tell you about that, let's have a look at Queen Elizabeth's preferences for food, and she loved desserts. She absolutely loved sugar, marchpane, pastries, tarts, cakes, cream, custard, crystallised fruit and syrup, novelties made out of sugar. She loved it. She loved sugar so much that actually her teeth were black. And the wealthier you were, the more rotten your teeth were likely to be. And having black teeth became a status symbol, and people blacked their teeth so it looked as if they were rich enough to buy sugar. And I sometimes wonder if it was after one of her opulent parties full of sugar and wine and wonderful puddings that somebody stumbled out and dropped their silver half-a-crown, which I then found centuries later. This is one of my special finds, which is a Queen Elizabeth I silver half-a-crown from 1601, and just a couple of years actually, minted a couple of years before Queen Elizabeth died. Or could it have been Queen Elizabeth herself, maybe, who lost it? Who knows? But one thing is for sure, she loved to travel on the River Thames between her favourite palaces. And here she is indeed, with her royal barge at Greenwich. And she would have passed right by where I gave my talk at Woods Quay, just on the embankment near Waterloo Bridge, and she would have absolutely loved it, the whole subject of Thames revelry in dining. And centuries later, our own Queen Elizabeth II also passed by where we had our talk and our event for the Totally Thames Festival in her royal barge, Gloriana, during the Diamond Jubilee celebrations in 2012. And here is indeed the Gloriana on which Queen Elizabeth II would have gone past Woods Quay. And I wanted to mention that Kate Woods, who hosted the event at Woods Quay, was instrumental in helping to design the interior of this absolutely beautiful barge. She worked very hard to design the interior, the carpeting, the furnishings and everything. So very, very talented lady, Kate Woods, to have done something as special as that. And so that is the end of my talk. And of course, you who are watching it now on a YouTube video, obviously you're not getting quite the same experience, because after the talk, we all went out onto the Woods Quay and looked out over the river and sipped on some gin and had some beautiful food. We tried some wild boar in the style of Tudor times, and we had some boiled eggs with pine nut sauce like the Romans would have eaten. And I said to everybody, you know, whilst you're eating and drinking this food and looking out over this river, to just sort of spend a little bit of time watching this liquid history flow past and just take a moment to think about some of the untold stories that are yet to be discovered underneath the River Thames that's flowing right past us. And so you might not be there at that venue, but you could also imagine now, as you're looking at this River Thames, you know, some of the stories that are yet to be told. And indeed, I'm sure that there are so many more stories there waiting to be discovered. And they really are, yeah, magical stories. Just to think that from a small find like a perfume bottle stopper, a trader's token, a coin, a wonderful story that provokes the imagination can just materialise. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of the talk which I did on Woods Quay for the Totally Thames Festival. And so that's it really. And thank you very much for watching. And hopefully next year at the Totally Thames Festival, I will do another talk on another fascinating subject. Hi everyone, it's me again. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that and that you learned some fun foodie facts, including how to cook a flamingo and larks in a pipkin. Who knew? You just never know what you're going to learn on this channel. And I'll put some photographs of the event up during the closing credits of this video. And I would like to wish you all a wonderful week ahead. Take care, and I'll be back again very soon with a mudlarking video. Thank you. Bye-bye.